Every country has its monsters, but in South Africa, they didn't just kill. They thrived in chaos, in superstition, in silence. Today, we count down the 5 worst serial killers this country has ever known. And when we reach the end, you'll understand why some evils should never be forgotten. Welcome back to another Halloween special here on Shadow Matter, where every week for the month of October, I'll be diving into a spookier and more evil side of our world. Recently, my wife and I have been watching Monster, the Ed Gein story on Netflix, and while grossed out, still found it enticing in a morbidly curious sort of way. That got me thinking, what other countries in the Southern Hemisphere have nightmares disguised as men? I've done Australia, I've done New Zealand. The next logical step is South Africa. So, hello, hoe gaan dit to my South African audience. I hope you guys enjoy this one. So, put the kids to bed, grab yourself some biltong, tell Oma you'll call her back tomorrow, and set your notifications to silent. Dit gaan hier spookachtig. Number 5, Stewart Wilken. The Boetie Boer. Port Elizabeth, the early 1990s. A time when the city's docks and truck stops were thick with poverty and forgotten lives. Among them walked a man locals called the Boetie Boer, brother farmer. His real name was Stewart Wilken. He began killing around 1990, preying on those no one would miss. Street children and sex workers who lived on society's edge. But his first known victim wasn't a stranger. It was his own daughter, Wane. He later told police he did it to save her from suffering. Investigators called it the moment a father became a monster. Once that barrier was broken, the killings continued. He roamed the industrial backstreets of Port Elizabeth, luring victims with trust, then silence. His preferred victims were sex workers and adolescent boys who were often homeless. Wilken's crimes were especially heinous, in part because he combined sexual violence, necrophilia, and alleged acts of cannibalism. One particularly disturbing confession that came later states that he ate the body parts of his victims. One such horrific act saw him mutilating a woman's, hoo-ha, and removing it. Wilken was as sick as they come, but he wasn't driven by greed or revenge. He was drawn to control, to possession. For years, he blended in the quiet man with the farmer's tan and easy smile. But in January 1997, the disappearance of a young boy finally exposed him. Henry Barker. Detectives brought him in for questioning. Within hours, Wilken began to talk, calmly, almost proudly, recounting crimes that spanned nearly a decade. His confession of the crime against young Henry Barker is really disturbing. Probably too disturbing to mention it here, so let's just say when 12-year-old Henry was not alive, Wilken returned to the scene to interfere during the stages of decomposition. More than once. He was convicted in 1998 of 7 murders and sentenced to 7 life terms. Judge Chris Jansen told him if the death penalty still existed in this country, I would not hesitate. Wilken only smiled. And with chilling calm, he said, the voices are quiet now, but they're still there, waiting. Even in prison, he signs his letters the same way he always did. Boetie loves you. Number 4, Sithole. The Pheonix Strangler. I hope I pronounced that right. Pheonix, a small township just outside of Durban, 1996. Sugarcane fields stretch for miles along the airport road, tall, rustling, concealing. It was there that a quiet labourer named Sithole turned the promise of work into a death sentence. He lured women with job offers, led them deep into the green maze, tied them up, assaulted them, and strangled them, often with their own underwear. When he was done, he relied on the farming practice of burning the fields of canes off, erasing his evidence in the roaring heat. 16 victims, each one found buried under the same scorched soil. Twala's killing spree began around 1996 near Pheonix, a township just outside of Durban. He targeted women aged roughly 18 to 45, usually poor job seekers he met at taxi ranks or roadside stops. Many of his victims were poor black women from Durban's surrounding townships, people who traveled long distances for work or casual labor. In those communities, police often assumed these women had simply moved on or gone to the city. But by late 1996, sugarcane workers near Mount Edgecombe and Pheonix began discovering shallow graves, bodies bound and buried beneath the cane roots. The burn patterns in the fields were suspicious. Some workers often said Twala himself was often nearby, helping to clear burnt plots after the blazes. Despite this, the connection wasn't made immediately. Police attributed the early finds to unrelated domestic killings, and without forensic links, the pattern was invisible. By early 1997, the disappearances had become so frequent that local women nicknamed the unseen predator the Pheonix Strangler. Taxi drivers and cane cutters told investigators about a man offering women jobs at nearby resorts. "He speaks nicely," they said, "but don't go with him." Still, many did. Employment was scarce and the promise of steady pay was powerful. Families filled missing persons reports, but with limited manpower and outdated record keeping, there was no coordinated system to flag the pattern across multiple precincts. For a time, police had nothing. The terrain devoured clues and witnesses feared speaking out. Then came DNA, a new science in South Africa's mid-90s investigations. Twala's blood linked him to multiple crime scenes. How they caught him is actually nothing short of remarkable. In July 1997, a surviving woman came forward. She told detectives that a man had offered her work, led her into the cane, tied her hands, but she managed to escape. Her description matched a local labourer, Sithole Twala. When police cross-checked DNA from earlier crime scene samples with his blood, the match was unmistakable. That discovery, one of South Africa's first major DNA breakthroughs, revealed that the same man had been responsible for at least 16 murders across the Pheonix and Mount Edgecombe region. When detectives compared soil, clothing, and plant growth data at several canefield dump sites, they concluded that the earliest seen had been left about 8 months before Twala's arrest in July 1997, placing the initial murder around November 1996 at the latest. Forensic pathologists and witness testimony from the woman who escaped confirmed his modus operandi was consistent from the start. He promised work, led his victims into the cane, bound and assaulted them, then strangled them with clothing or grass cord. During interrogation, he was calm, detached, no remorse, no excuses, just a faint smirk as he asked for a cigarette. He was convicted in 1999 on 16 counts of murder and sentenced to 506 years in prison. When asked if he feared hell, Twala said, "Hell? I've already been there. It smells like burnt sugar." Ooh, throwing shade at the judge, man. What the hell? The Pheonix Strangler became a legend of terror, proof that even paradise can hide a predator. Number 3. Thuleni Monster, the monster of Thuleni. In the small Eastern Cape village of Thuleni, fear became a neighbor. Between 2008 and 2012, a quiet, expressionless farmhand named Thuleni Monster began killing in the night. He would break into homes while families slept, hacking through wooden floors with an axe or panga. He assaulted women, murdered children, and wiped out entire households. By dawn, only silence remained. And bodies. The killings followed a pattern, attacks during power cuts or storms when darkness blanketed the settlement. Over 4 years, more than 20 people died. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can you have that many power cuts to commit all those murders? Well, according to a few South African friends of mine, unfortunately, due to South Africa's electrical grid, the system isn't the best and has been in a steady decline over the last 20 to 30 years. Power cuts and blackouts are frequent. The first victim was a woman. She was attacked in her home while she slept during one of Thuleni's recurring power cuts. Mabai later confessed that he entered her home through a window, armed with a panga or a machete by another name, and killed her before assaulting the body. Her body was discovered by neighbors the following morning. This killing, both brutal and inexplicable, was initially viewed as an isolated domestic attack. No one yet realized it was the beginning of a 5-year nightmare. Over the next few years, a series of eerily similar murders occurred within just a few kilometers of Nkomo's home. Families slaughtered in their sleep, female victims often assaulted, sometimes in front of their relatives, and children killed to eliminate witnesses. At first, villagers suspected witchcraft or muti killings, ritual murders tied to superstition because the level of savagery seemed unreal. But by 2010, patterns emerged. The killings happened only on certain nights, usually Fridays or during storms when the power grid went down and the village fell into complete darkness. In 2012, after yet another family was murdered, police set up night patrols in Thuleni. One evening, an officer noticed fresh prints near a newly broken door. Police eventually traced footprints from a murder scene back to Mbai's shack. Inside, blood-stained clothes, women's undergarments, and children's belongings. In court, he told the judge he'd been possessed by evil spirits. The villagers believed him. They called him Isidulakala, the Devil Man. He pleaded guilty to 20 murders and nearly 30 sexual assaults. When the sentence was read, 25 life terms. He didn't blink. He said the spirits made him do it, one reporter wrote, but it was the fear that kept them alive. Even now, the people of Thuleni still speak of locking their doors before the wind begins to howl. Number 2, Cedric Maake, the Wema Pan Killer. Johannesburg, 1996, a city alive with noise, traffic, and tension, where opportunity and desperation walk side by side. In that chaos, one man began to hunt. His name was Cedric Maake. To his neighbors, he was quiet, polite, a handyman who fixed radios and bicycles. But to the other people of Johannesburg, he would soon become known as the Wema Pan Killer, one of South Africa's most prolific and complex serial murderers. His first known victim was Dan Shakal Patel, a tailor who owned a small shop in central Johannesburg. One morning in April 1996, Patel was attacked in his store. Maake bludgeoned him with a hammer, stole his wallet, and left him for dead. Patel later died in hospital. At first, police saw nothing unusual. It looked like a robbery. Tragic, but not uncommon. But this was just the beginning. Over the following months, Johannesburg descended into fear. Men were being murdered in their shops, beaten with hammers. Elsewhere, couples parked near Wema Pan Lake were ambushed, shot, or strangled. The media reported it as the work of 2 different serial killers, and the police thought as much. The police even had 2 separate task forces investigating what they believed were unrelated sprees. One was hunting the hammer killer, the other the Wema Pan murderer. But the truth was more disturbing. They were the same man. Criminal profilers would later describe Maake as compartmentalized, able to live 2 distinct lives. By day, he appeared normal, helpful, charming, even likable. By night, he was methodical and ruthless. Sometimes he killed to rob, sometimes it seemed just to feel powerful. He planned his attacks carefully, often returning to the same streets or the same stretch of lake as if drawn there. Each crime fed something in him, the illusion of control. For months, Maake stayed invisible. Then, in December 1997, he made one single fatal mistake. He murdered a man and stole his bicycle, then took it to a pawn shop to sell. When he filled out the pawn slip, he used an alias, the same false name he'd used in connection with several of the Hammer murders. That name was already on the police's radar, and when investigators cross-referenced the pawn records, everything clicked. The Hammer murders, the Wema Pan killings, the bicycle sale, all pointed to one man, Cedric Maake. Police raided his home soon after. Inside, they found stolen property, clothing, jewelry, and personal items belonging to victims. Ballistics and forensic testing linked his revolver to several Wema Pan murders. Blood traces on his hammer tied him to the others. When confronted with the evidence, Maake confessed, describing his crimes in unnervingly calm detail. It was as if he was recounting someone else's life. In 2000, Cedric Maake was convicted on 27 counts of murder, and more than 100 related charges included attempted murder, sexual assault, and robbery. He received 27 life sentences, plus an additional 1,159 years in prison. His case became a landmark in South African forensic history, the first to use formal criminal profiling to link 2 supposedly separate killing sprees onto one offender. He was both the Hammer killer and the Wema Pan killer, the worker and the predator, coexisting within the same man. To this day, criminologists still study his crimes as a case study in duality, the terrifying ability to live a double life while the world remains blind. And the media crowned him the man of many faces, a husband, a father, a friend, and a ghost who hunted beside the water. Before we get to our number 1 spot, here are a few dishonorable mentions. Daisy de Melka, the Black Widow of Johannesburg. Long before DNA and criminal profiling, Johannesburg had its own kind of evil. Polite, perfumed, and poisonous. In the 1920s, Daisy de Melken, a trained nurse, began outliving her husbands. One died of suspected dysentery, another of heart failure. Then her son poisoned with strychnine after signing an insurance policy. Investigators found receipts for arsenic and cyanide. Neighbors whispered about the teacups she never shared. Her trial in 1932 became a national obsession, South Africa's first media circus. Reporters described her as calm, ladylike, and entirely without conscience. She was hanged at Pretoria Prison that November. Her final words were a whisper no one heard. Some monsters wear blood, the prosecutors said. She wore lace. Dishonorable mention number 2, Elifasi Msomi, the axe killer. KwaZulu Natal, mid-1950s, Elifasi Msomi traveled from village to village preaching, claiming to possess healing powers. But the spirits he served demanded blood. Of course they did. He told police a Tokoloshe, or Tokoloshe, a dwarf-like demon from Zulu folklore, spoke to him, that it followed him, whispering names of people to kill. Tokoloshe Kanyo Vangalangalang. If you know, you know. 15 men, women, and children died under his axe before he was captured. At trial, Msomi pleaded that the Tokoloshe controlled him. The court found otherwise. He was executed in 1956. Some say his followers refused to bury him for fear the spirit would escape. Others believe it never left. He said he wasn't alone, a witness recalled. Maybe he wasn't. Number 1. Moses Sithole, the ABC killer, aka the worst serial killer South Africa has ever seen, aka the man that is one letter away from being an unfortunate surname. Attridgeville, Boksburg, Cleveland, 3 townships, 3 letters. A, B, C. From 1994 to 1995, as South Africa celebrated the end of apartheid, Moses Sithole was hunting women through the promise of hope. He spoke well, dressed neatly, and carried himself with the same confidence of a professional. He told women he worked for a charity called Youth Against Human Abuse, a non-profit he'd invented himself. He promised them work, training, and security. And in a nation where poverty and unemployment were still rampant, his offer sounded like salvation. It wasn't. His first known victim was Maria Moneni Monama, just 18 years old, killed on the 6th of August, 1994. Then Amanda Kibafeli Tete, 26, on the 19th of August. And then Joyce Takani Mashabela, 32, on the 7th of September. Each was lured by the same promise of opportunity. Each was found dead soon after. By the end of that year, bodies were turning up across Attridgeville, Boksburg, and Cleveland. 3 cities, 3 initials. And from those letters came a name that would haunt South Africa forever, the ABC Killer. Bodies began appearing near train tracks and mine shafts, each bound with the victim's own underwear. 38 confirmed dead. Possibly more than 50? Sithole knew exactly what he was doing. He exploited economic desperation, targeting unemployed black women between the ages of 18 and 40. He carried application forms, ID badges, and recruitment papers to fake his charity, for his fake charity. He met women in public, taxi ranks, shopping centers, busy sidewalks, then offered to escort them to his office. Yeah, there was no office, only an open veld, or field in English, quiet and remote. He would later tell a clinical psychologist that he chose his victims because they reminded him of a woman who had accused him of sexual assault years earlier. He'd served time for that conviction, a sentence he claimed was unjust. In his mind, these killings were revenge. Every woman he murdered, he said, was punishment for what had been done to him. This was a lie, but it was one he told himself until the very end. For more than a year, Sithole travelled across Gauteng, targeting women who trusted him. The newly formed South African Police Service was overwhelmed. The FBI was called in. By the time they identified the pattern, over 30 women were dead. By mid-1995, police had found dozens of women strangled in open veld and mine areas stretching from Attridgeville to Boksburg and Cleveland, all bound in the same way, all linked by fake job offers. Journalists dubbed him the ABC Killer. Under immense public pressure, the South African Police Service, or SAPS, formed a special task force led by Brigadier Piet Bjelveld and others, with assistance from FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, who confirmed They were dealing with a classic organized serial killer. In October 1995, Sithole phoned Tamsin de Beer, a journalist at the Star newspaper, and confessed to the killings. He described details only the murderer would know, and revealed the location of a body that police had not yet found. When detectives confirmed his story, they knew it was him. Within days, police released his name and photograph to the public. The manhunt began in earnest. After the story broke, Sithole contacted his brother-in-law asking for a gun. He said he needed protection. The brother-in-law alerted police immediately. A trap was set, a meeting arranged at the Benoni factory where the brother-in-law worked. An undercover officer, Francis Milovedzi, was stationed at the gate disguised as a security guard. His job? Detained Sithole when he arrived. On the 18th of October 1995, Sithole showed up. He looked calm, but wary, scanning faces, watching for movement. When unaware guards asked Officer Milovedzi to fetch the brother-in-law, he refused, never taking his eyes off the suspect. That moment of hesitation tipped Sithole off. He turned and ran. Milovedzi chased him through the yard and down a narrow alley. Cornered, Sithole swung an axe, slashing the officer's hand. Milovedzi drew his weapon and fired twice, hitting Sithole in the leg and stomach. He collapsed and was arrested on the spot. In hospital, Sithole was eerily calm. He confessed to detectives in detail, naming victims, describing scenes, outlining his motives. Later, while awaiting trial, he recorded another confession on video for a fellow inmate, hoping to profit from the story. Yeah, what? But when his case reached court, he changed everything, pleading not guilty, claiming he had been coerced. Police didn't need his cooperation. They had DNA evidence linking him to numerous victims. They had survivor testimony from women who had escaped his attacks. And they had the journalist's verified recording, proving he'd confessed voluntarily. 2 victims were also traced directly to Sithole through job application forms found during the investigation. In 1997, he was convicted of 38 murders, 40 counts of sexual assault, and 6 robberies, and was sentenced to, get this, 2,410 years. His trial became one of South Africa's most watched cases. He remains in prison to this day, reportedly infected with HIV, painting portraits and denying everything. Throughout the investigation and trial, Sithole presented himself as the victim, wronged by women, by society, by fate. He retracted his statements, blamed others, and insisted he had been misunderstood. He wrote letters from prison filled with self-pity and denial, never once mentioning remorse. It was the psychology of a narcissist, a man who would destroy lives, then write about his own suffering as if he were the one in pain. His trial became one of South Africa's most watched cases. Even his wife testified against him. Oh yeah, he had a wife and a daughter. Her name was Martha Ndlovu. They met in 1993 while Sithole was still in prison. It began as a simple exchange of letters, a romance behind bars. To Martha, he was a misunderstood man trying to start over. To Sithole, she was the proof that he could still wear the mask of normalcy. After his release later that year for good behavior, he moved in with Martha and her family in Pretoria. They married in March 1995, not long after the birth of their daughter, Bridget. For a brief moment, they seemed like any other young family, hopeful, domestic, ordinary. But that illusion didn't last. By July 1995, the marriage had unraveled. Martha told the court years later about the argument that ended it. Shouting, anger, the sound of a door slamming for the last time. She never saw him again until his arrest. When she testified at his trial, she helped confirm his connection to some of the jewelry and personal belongings recovered from victims, evidence that placed him directly at the scenes. Her words helped secure his conviction. He remains in prison, reportedly infected with HIV, painting portraits and denying everything. But unfortunately, the tragedy doesn't end there. Both Martha and Bridget were later found to be HIV positive, infected by Sithole himself. While he received treatment in prison, they did not. Both died from AIDS-related illnesses. A family destroyed, not by circumstance, but by one man's cruelty. Moses Sithole remains behind bars in CMAX prison. He is remembered not just for the scale of his crimes, but for the precision of his deceit. A man who turned kindness into a weapon, an opportunity into a trap. Because sometimes evil doesn't arrive with blood and chaos. Sometimes it wears a suit. sometimes it smiles. Moses Sithole isn't just South Africa's worst serial killer. He is the country's living reminder that evil can evolve with society, that progress doesn't erase the darkness, it only gives it new disguises. He hunted during the birth of a new nation, a journalist once wrote, and left a trail that still bleeds through its history. From poison tea to burnt sugarcane, from mythic demons to modern psychopaths, South Africa's killers tell one long story of power, fear, and silence. The faces change, the tools evolve, but the hunger stays the same. Because evil doesn't vanish, it waits patiently for the next crack in the light. Every country has its monsters, but some are carved into the soil itself. Who do you think was the worst on this list? Let me know in the comments below. This has been another Halloween special, 5 of South Africa's worst serial killers. I've been Shadow Matter, and you have been awesome. Like, subscribe, and slap that bell icon like someone can't keep your wife's name out of their mouth. And I'll see you next week for another Halloween special. Stay spooky, Shadow fam. Number 3. Thuleni Monster. The first victim was a woman named Nosiselo Nkomo Isidilakile. They called him something weird. At trial, Msomi pleaded that the Tokoloshe controlled him. Read that part again. Led by Brigadier Piet Biel. Why can't you guys have normal names?